Dr. G, I want to get into the Khashoggi stuff with you. I want to get into some of the Iran news stories that have been out there. But I want to start with this FGM case. I'm sure you're aware of it because I know that you read conservative new media. And this is one where luckily I am seeing it pop up certain establishment media places. I don't like the way they're writing some of the stories. They're downplaying the religious element of it. But let's talk a little bit about this. This is a judge dismissing female genital mutilation charges in a historic case. Talk to us about how barbaric this practice is and what your read is on this news story.
Well, I mean, you can just ask Ayan Hirsi Ali. She'll give you the gory details of just how horrific FGM is. And this is that phrase, canary in a coal mine. This is the test of Western civilization. If you're prepared to give in, to surrender to multiculturalism and moral relativity, then this is what happens. You permit these kinds of brutal, there's no other word for it. It's savagery to occur inside your Judeo-Christian nation. If not, then you make a stand and you say that this is wrong wherever it occurs, whether it occurs in sub-Saharan Africa or whether it occurs in Baltimore. This is wrong. This is evil. And this tells you everything you need to know about the difference between civilization and barbarity. And it is the litmus test for whether a civilization wants to survive or not.
Yeah, and I think this is a challenge that the right needs to take up right away, because I understand that I guess this kind of throws it back to the states, but this is one where it can't be welcome at all, not even a little bit, not even one time in American society. It needs to get tamped out right away. And I'm very curious to see if the right will move quickly on this, because it seems like also a home run political issue, because it does put it on the Me Too crowd that wants to believe all women and defend all women. I would love to see their reaction to this.
This is the ultimate test for whether you're a feminist. Forget which party you vote for. If you say you're for women's rights, then there's only one right answer in this question, and it's defending women, and it's defending them from this kind of savagery that mutilates them for the rest of their life. And it is so telling how you never hear the establishment left-wing, third-wave feminists say anything about mutilation of women in this regard.
Yeah, this is where I think you and I, who are happy warriors, see a case like this, and it's alarming, but we're not ones to get into hysteria mode. We're into let's do something mode, and there's a chance to make this one that you can definitely find a silver lining in this, which is that this should be a unifying issue for the country, not just a right or left issue. You want to talk about something bipartisan. Let's get this stuff banned right away.
Right, and it tells you it's all the more important because this is one of the issues where the right is good on logic. We can dam the Potomac with policy papers about facts on tax reform and international trade, but what we're weak on is showing ourselves as the compassionate party. The left seems to have this lock on compassion, not really for any good reason, because they're not about compassion, they're about power. But this is one of those cases where we can say, look, we care for the women. And not only that, in most cases, in most Muslim cultures, this occurs to young girls, to prepubescent girls. If you want to protect women, there's only one side to be on. It's the same with, let me just transition this to the border issue and the caravan.
Sure, why not?
If you want to show compassion, if you really want to, as an American, if you want to show compassion to the most vulnerable people in our society, you stop illegal migration. Because guess what? When illegal migrants come across the border, it's not Alex Marlowe, it's not Sebastian Gorka that are going to suffer. We'll be just fine. It's the people who came here legally, who most often came from Latin American countries, who are at the bottom of the income scale, working their tail off for their children. And when somebody comes in and says, I'm going to take your job and get paid cash for it, guess who loses their job? It's that new legal immigrant. So again, the right has an opportunity here to play the narrative game, but in a good way, and show the world that if you really are the compassionate person you think you are, you should be on only one side of these issues, whether it's FGM or whether it's a caravan.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I want to return this momentarily, Dr. G, but I do have to note that we have a special guest in studio now. Baby Marlowe is down here, and he has insisted on producing the segment. He says, Dad, the show's a bit of a downer so far today, and I would need you to, Dr. G's on, we're going to make this more lively and fun. And I said, Baby Marlowe, you're 3 months old. You don't have any idea how to produce radio. You don't know the first thing about radio. And he says, trust me, Dad. It is in his blood. I was actually just joking with Mrs. Dr. Marlowe that he's going to have a moment probably sometime when he's about 5 or 6 where it dawns on him that not everyone's daddy speaks out of the black box in the kitchen, that it's only going to be his and maybe a couple others, maybe your kids too, Dr. G. But we
need a photograph of him posted right now with his headphones in front of the mic.
He's got it. But Dr. G, there is something funny here. He's got an incredible onesie on right now, almost identical to the Pajama Boy onesie. And so I Googled Pajama Boy, and I realized he dressed exactly like, he dressed exactly like my 3-month-old. And one of the first images that comes up is a meme of you saying on Election Day that the era of Pajama Boy is over and the alpha males are back. It was so funny because it was just moments before I had you on. It's literally one of the top Google searches is funny. A Dr. Gorka meme.
But it's funny, isn't it true? I mean, who's been talking about Pajama Boys for the last 2 years? They must be hiding in the basement with their binky. I mean, they've disappeared, haven't they?
Oh yeah, they're nowhere to be found, which is great. I mean, it is very funny because we do have some serious issues to deal with. And joking aside, and it's good to joke around. Dr. G and I are old friends. He was the former national security editor for Breitbart News, former assistant to the president, as well, an author of a couple of great books, including Defeating Jihad, The Winnable War, and Why We Fight, which is out now. He's got a new radio show launches first thing next year. We'll talk about that a little bit too. But let's turn back to the caravan. You're exactly right that we've been making this point with Brandon Darby and our Cartel Chronicles at Breitbart News for years, which is that the people who are victimized in this are normal little people in Central and South America, in Mexico. These enable the cartels. The Mexican government is a part of this. It is discriminatory against American, not just American immigrants, which goes without saying because it undermines what they did to get into the country legally, as you did. But it's also for those American workers. And I'll tell you, Dr. G, I had a conversation with some guys who are in here helping me around the house. I'm making some home improvements this year. And these are our blue-collar guys who have good, solid jobs. You could tell they were left of center a little bit, but they got the immigration issue that they know you start importing a new generation of cheap workers. They're not getting a raise this year, and they know it. And these are blue-collar Americans that deserve not to be punished because we have an open border.
They may not get a raise. They may actually lose their job this year if we allow these people to flood through. So first things first, let's again, name recognition and doff our caps. Brandon Darby's work for Breitbart on these issues is absolutely without par. My colleague at Fox, Sarah Carter, actually going down to the caravan, interviewing these people, talking to the security services of the country they travel through, also without par. And then lastly, you've got to go online right now. I'll post it as soon as I get off the show. Army Horowitz went down to interview members of the caravan, posted a video last night, sent it to me. It is incredible. Every single person he spoke to, and 90% of the caravan were young men of military age. Every single one of them, when asked, why are you going to America? They didn't say, because I'm going to be killed back home because I need political asylum. They said, I'm going for economic reasons to get a job. And this is why, for example, for far too long, the Chamber of Commerce has been on the wrong side of this issue. The Democrats, this is the completely satanic alliance. The Democrats want new voters, be they illegal voters or be they naturalized from some kind of amnesty, and the Chamber of Commerce wants the cheap labor. And that's why we've got to stop this for reasons of national security, election integrity, and for the most vulnerable in our society at the bottom of the income ladder.
Yeah, Ami Horowitz, yes, he's a sort of a guerrilla journalist. He's also a super funny guy. And yes, I watched the video. It was it's amazing stuff. We should try to have him on the show producer Paul at some point. He does great work, went down the caravan, and he debunks a lot of myths. In particular, he notes that a lot of the folks, almost everyone in the caravan, and you can see it from the photos, is not women and children streaming over the border. It's young men, and that is problematic for a million reasons. Dr. G, I want to move forward and talk a little bit about the one of the biggest stories yesterday. The president, even though we're supposed to get the CIA report, Francis Martel has been keeping a close eye on the Khashoggi situation for us, and there's almost nothing that is known solid because the sourcing coming out of Turkey is just it's not credible. None of it's credible. But we're told the CIA is going to tell us that Mohammed bin Salman, who is the crown prince of Saudi Arabia and someone that the president and others in the White House have forged a relationship with over the last 2 years, ordered this execution. There's been a ton of fake news on this story, but the president came out yesterday and said that he's siding with the Saudis because of America First. Let's play this clip, 1A, Mr. Paul.
Because it's America first for me. It's all about America first. We're not going to give up hundreds of billions of dollars in orders and let Russia, China, and everybody else have them. It's all about, for me, very simple. It's America first. Saudi Arabia, if we broke with them, I think your oil prices would go through the roof. I've kept them down. They've helped me keep them down. Right now we have low oil prices, or relatively. I'd like to see it go down even lower. But I think that it's a very simple equation for me. I'm about make America great again, and I'm about America first.
And the president's statement, Dr. G, that he put out on this has been widely criticized by establishment media, but I still think the guts of this are on the money. I don't see why you throw out the baby with the bathwater. I don't know why there's journalists that get murdered. I mean, dozens, I think, this year in Mexico alone. It's not to be taken lightly. It's not a good thing. It looks very bad for the crown prince, but it's not something where I think you should derail America's entire foreign policy over this one man.
They say politics is the art of the possible, and exactly the same thing holds for geopolitics and strategy. And what the president is doing is making a strategic decision. Strategy starts with prioritization. Despite the fact that this man was a Muslim Brotherhood member, close friends with Osama bin Laden, a man who actually wanted to see theocracy spread in the Middle East, not be turned back. He was murdered despite of all these things, and he didn't deserve to be murdered. But you don't make one murder, you don't make that affect a strategic relationship that not only affects, for example, the producers of American products that are being sold to Saudi Arabia. So it's not just about protecting jobs in America. It's about the region. Think about the fact that since January the 20th last year, the Middle East, thanks to Donald Trump, has seen a tectonic reordering in terms of relationships. This was a region on fire. Remember, the rise of ISIS, our withdrawal from the region, the constant spread of Iranian influence all the way down to the Bekaa Valley, thanks in part to the JCPOA-Iran deal. All of that stopped when Donald Trump became the commander-in-chief, and we saw a realignment of the constellation in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia reestablished good relations with us. That was one of the first things we did in the White House, and I have to give credit. Steve Bannon was a big piece of that. That realigning was so effective. Think about this. Two things, two metrics. The GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, turned its back on Qatar, the worst financier of jihadi ideology and exporter of that ideology around the world. And then nations like Saudi Arabia actually became friends with Israel. This is incredible. In the space of less than a year, nations that had been financing or involved in undermining the peace in the Middle East and undermining our closest ally, Israel, suddenly became friends of the Jewish state. You cannot put all of that at risk. You don't put you don't make that a hostage to the murder of Khashoggi, who is a foreign national killed on foreign territory. That's the president's call, and it was the right call.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's exactly the correct analysis from Dr. Sebastian Gorka. That's why we have him on the show. And I'm glad you're reinforcing my viewpoint. I wish I could add more to it, but that basically nails it for me. And that's good because you were in the White House dealing with these things. And by the way, this is one where it seems like the White House, which I know so much is made about factions within the White House. This is one where there seemed like there was pretty big consensus here on this one,
yes.
That the sort of Kushner wing and the Bannon wing, I mean, everyone kind of agreed that the alternative of a rising Turkey and a rising Iran was a much worse alternative to perhaps a slightly empowered Mohammed bin Salman. And I don't really see it as a close call either.
And one more thing that you have to add to the equation. A rising Iran. We're going to deal. We've already dealt with ISIS. The rising Sunni jihadism is something that can be contained. But when you look at what Iran has been doing since 1979, when you look at its intent to create its Shia version of caliphate, it is just cutting off your nose to spite your face if you go after Saudi Arabia in such a way that empowers Iran, and the president will not do that because he knows the biggest troublemaker, the biggest threat in the region is Iran.
Okay, so there was a report out in the UK Independent, which is often fake news, from earlier this week that did report that there is escalating tensions with Iran. There's always tough talk going back and forth. It's tough to know what is real and what is not. But Dr. G, this is your area of expertise. So talk to us a little bit about it. Iran, I think, is a huge threat. We don't want a hot war there, but we need to. They do want to wipe Israel off the map. It's something that we must take seriously at any given moment. So what's up here?
Well, to quote the great Elie Wiesel, when asked about what he learned as a man who survived the Holocaust and lost most of his family in the Holocaust, he said many, many, many years ago, when a group of people repeatedly call for your destruction, sooner or later you should take them seriously. And Iran, since practically the inception of the new regime, the theocracy, has called literally every Friday for the destruction of the great Satan, which is us, and the small Satan, which is Israel. If you look at the recent figures from the last 18 years, we know, and this is unclassified, you can look it up in open sources, that Iran has been responsible for the death of U.S. servicemen abroad. So these are the incontrovertible facts, and it remains the largest sponsor of state terrorism. So the president understands this. The pressure has been put back on board. Finally, the JCPOA was canceled. Now the latest raft of sanctions is really putting the heat on. To the listeners out there, very simple message. The president is never going to go neocon on you. He is not an interventionist, but he knows when there's a threat, and he knows when action needs to be taken to weaken a regime. It's not about invasion. It's not about occupation. It's about undermining the capacity of the mullah's regime to do harm to us or our friends. And right now, Iran is in trouble, most specifically for economic reasons. And it is the great irony of dictatorships. The more centralized they become, the more they try to oppress their people. There comes a point where they become all the more fragile. We've seen this before. So God willing, there will be some change in Iran. It will be done by Iranians, but this nation must be weakened.
All right. So Dr. Sebastian Gorka, anything else on your mind right now that you want to share with this audience?
I just like, everybody, when you get into, chats around the water cooler or over Thanksgiving, this outrageous behavior by the mainstream media comparing Ivanka Trump with Hillary Clinton. I've seen allegedly conservative commentators make the comparison, which is absolutely, we're talking about the difference between a person setting up a private, illegal email system to move classified, the top secret classified information illegally on her server, with a woman who was using email for non-classified purposes, after which she became apprised of the regulations, duplicated all the emails onto her official system so they would be traceable in the official presidential record system. The idea that these two things are comparable is, of course, fake news.
Yeah, the fakest of the fake. I appreciate that, Dr. G. And this is something I opened the show talking about this in contrast to how much time is dedicated to that story relative to the FGM story. And folks who listen to the show know I think it was a big mistake that the family members went into the White House. But look, they're there, and they're reality at this point. And this is just, it's so bogus to suggest last I checked, there was no hammering of any private bathroom downstairs server. There's no lying about it, suggesting that bleach bidding and wiping the server meant with a cloth. There's nothing, anything like that, and yet you're seeing the locker up trend. It's such a cautionary tale at how cruel and mean the left is, and how the zero willingness to be fair to anyone associated with this president.
But it's more than that. Fairness, it sounds kind of quaint.
Sure does.
It's deeper than that. It is an absolute disregard for the truth. The truth is irrelevant. If there is a narrative that can be used to attack the president or his family or his administration, it must be invested in. Anything that does not do that is irrelevant. And that's why you see these latest figures, this poll. What was the poll? More than 70% of the population think it is the media that is responsible for the divisive nature of American politics today. Right on. That is what fake news creates in America.
Dr. Sebastian Gorka, love it. You guys are going to love the book, too, Why We Fight, if you haven't all read it by now. Defeating America's Enemies with No Apologies. Appreciate the time. Happy Thanksgiving to you, sir, and thanks for making the early stop with us.
And to you and yours, and let's see that photograph of the real pajama man with his head.
Yeah, that's right. It is amazing that the advertisement for Obamacare was a guy who dresses like a 3-month-old. It's amazing. They thought that was a good idea. That backfired pretty quick. Thanks, Dr. G. We got to run. We'll be back.